is my response video to the assignment for addiction counseling in families that is had to be done this week. Um, the whole idea was to document my emotional reactions for a minimum of 3 days. I did 4, and the assignment came at a perfect time because I recently got married. So, with that being said, there has been many of emotional reactions that has occurred, especially because my husband and I have never cohabitated. We've never lived in the same space. He's African and I'm Black American, so we have cultural differences as well, besides the gender difference. And so it has, in just 1 week's time, it has been a huge adjustment, to say the least. And of course, when you have people that are so different merging together, especially from so many different aspects, that brings conflict not necessarily always being a screaming match, but naturally there's going to be some type of conflict. One thing in particular, I want to start small and then kind of graduate larger. One of the biggest conflicts we had is he has a certain type of toothpaste that he uses, and we, went on our honeymoon, came back, and I have my own toothpaste, but I didn't get mine out the bag. So when we came home, I kept using his. For some reason, it could be because my toothpaste has a flip top and his is an unscrew one. I'm not accustomed to screwing my toothpaste lids back on anymore. So I kept accidentally leaving his off. And one day his thing was, you're not allowed to use my toothpaste anymore if you cannot put the lid back on. And I'm just like, I'm sorry. I don't know why I keep doing that. I have to evaluate why I keep doing that, but I understand. But it was just one of those things where I'm a creature of habit. So my response to him was, that I would have to do my part in evaluating why I struggle putting his top back onto his toothpaste. Where it comes to similarity with childhood is, again, me being a creature of habit in the way that I respond. When I was a young one and I borrowed people's things, or I used people's things, and it did not, the way that I treated their things did not satisfy, I've always been very quick to analyze myself and see why a person's valuable is not as valuable to me, even if especially if I'm using it. What about my behavior? What do I see about what they have that doesn't quite weigh the same? And so what it tells me about my current buttons, especially because that didn't turn into anything crazy, but it just tells me that I myself have to be consistently better at weighing or being better yet, having a better initiative towards using people's things, even as minute as toothpaste, because it's someone else's. And even though we're one, his stuff is my stuff, vice versa, ultimately it's the brand that he chooses. He has his own brand, so that's his toothpaste. And understanding that by valuing someone else's items, that puts in a healthy boundary and a healthy border within the relationship that you have with someone. So on a bigger scale would be an actual argument that we had. Within this argument, because he's currently off in business now in London, and so before he left, we had like a sit down, just getting things in order. And with this being freshly married, there were just, of course, certain concerns that I had pertaining to what he's going to do and things of that nature, how he's going to spend his time, X, Y, and Z, things like that, like as a partner you would ask about. But because I was not satisfied with his answers and I felt he wasn't agreeing with me, it became an argument. And not even because he wanted to argue, but because I end up wanting to argue. So what ended up really being the issue is that he agreed to what I asked of him. I made the, I won't say demands, but I asked, for certain things to take place while he's there, and he agreed to that. But because he wasn't saying it the way that I felt he needed to, because we didn't see eye to eye, instead of me just letting it go, I felt like I had to be right. Like, in my mind, we had to agree, because if we didn't agree, that meant that his boundaries aren't my boundaries, and if his boundaries aren't my boundaries, then then he's out of pocket, or things of that nature. So it turned into a massive flare up, because I came back, and again, cultural differences, something that I said to him triggered him to anger. But when I said it, I felt I was just being direct, but in his eyes, I was being disrespectful. And it turned into almost an all-day affair. Again, freshly married, so it turned into almost an all-day affair, and it was Valentine's Day at that. So it turned into just this big, huge issue that really never had to happen had I just taken a step back. Even when he asked me to be calm, had I really just taken that moment to completely wind down and assess the situation, then it wouldn't have escalated. But even once it escalated, then he said things that hurt my feelings, and of course it went into a back and forth, until finally we had to kind of take a break apart, everybody chill, calm down, and then come back together and just kind of agree to disagree, and me just respecting the fact that he respects me enough not to cross certain boundaries. And so again, what triggered my emotional response was definitely the fact that I felt he had to agree for me. He had to agree that I was right, because without him validating that I was right, it felt as if his boundaries were not correct, which you cannot force someone to have the same boundaries that you have or agree with your boundaries, but just love and respect that they love and respect you enough to honor your boundaries and not cross them. And so it reminds me of my childhood, definitely, because I grew up in a home where my biological father and even my stepfather, of my little sister, not my current one, they disrespected my mom's boundaries all the time. And growing up in homes with domestic violence, and growing up in homes where people do not honor the person that they're with, it created in me, growing up, this distinct need to be right. Like, if I feel that you are not respecting my boundaries because you agree and understand, then I'm going to come for your jugular, based off of seeing so many boundaries crossed and so much dishonor in my mom's marriages. And so it tells me about my button that I can't be that prideful, or dare I even say arrogant, in a sense of having to be right. I don't have to be right. I just have to have peace. And as long as I have a spouse that cares about what I care about enough, that even if he doesn't agree, for the sake of his love for me and the sake of knowing that I will be at peace, will honor that, I can't respond in a way that is not conducive to who he is, because he's not like my father, he's not like my stepdad, he's like himself, and he's a different man, and I can't treat him any differently than that. So learning my button of coming into a consciousness that I don't always have to be right, and that's something him and I discussed that day, is that it's a habit that I have, that if I'm not agreed with because I'm right with someone that is personal and close to me, then I feel like they don't respect my boundaries, and it's not the same thing. They're not synonymous. So it's been an interesting thing. It really brought a lot to the forefront for me, and I plan to keep implementing this as I go on this new journey of life.